Hertzwave is a technology-based startup based out of Bangalore in the sustainability space. What we do is scope 3 emissions automation, carbon accounting and integrating it into the firm's financial system. We also help companies do carbon credits. So this is broadly what we aim to do. This has certain processes in it, like first is data collection. We use the IoT sensors to collect data. Once we collect the data, we send it to the cloud algorithms for it to analyze, based on which we do the carbon emissions and carbon accounting. The important thing is we club in certain technologies which are there. It has got an IoT sensor-based data collection. Apart from that, we have the agentic AIs in the cloud, and we also have the financial integration packages to help companies report adequately. So this is what Hertzwave does. Right now we are focused on two areas of the two verticals. One is we are basically talking about large commercial buildings, typically airports, hotels, those kind of buildings, and big spaces which require a lot of energy, and manufacturing space. Hopefully in the next few months into hospitality space and into wellness industry as well. We have done a lot of work in scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, basically emissions which are directly relatable to company itself. For example, the energy consumptions by companies. And we have done a lot of work, we have done a lot of ROIs, and typically the energy savings are to the tune of 20 to 30%. We are quite hopeful that we can carry similar results into scope 3 emissions as well. In certain spaces of energy conservation, especially in terms of scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, which are directly relatable to companies or buildings, there have been substantial proof of concept cases done, and typically the savings are to the tune of 20 to 30%. Some of the areas where I have worked in personally are like cinema theatres and big halls, not so much in India but in Dubai and other Middle East countries, as well as there's a lot of works which has been done in Europe, and most savings are to the tune of 20 to 30%. The ROIs typically range from 2 years to 3 years. So there is a good potential for an ROI, there is a good potential for saving, and there is a good potential also as a business case. Yes, it has been done in scope 1 and scope 2. People have not done it so much in scope 3, purely because it is difficult to compute. And the difficulty in computing is because if we talk about the Indian context, there are so many suppliers who supply with different invoices and different languages, and there are so many other variables in what is being built through the supply chains to manufacturers. So what we are trying to do is to automate this process so that it becomes simpler for companies to do the scope 3 emissions. What you can measure is something, if you can measure something, then only you can improve that. So it is one of those areas where we are trying to automate it so that it becomes easier for companies to measure their scope 3 emissions, account for it, and make way for improving those scope 3 emissions. The traditional building management systems are typically static, that is, they are already pre-programmed and they give a particular result at a particular point of time. If you are talking about Hertzwave or the new companies who use cloud computing or cloud algorithms and all, we are far more dynamic. That is, we are more relevant at that particular moment of time. And it's not pre-programmed. Systems tend to pick up what is required from the cloud and implement it. Talked about a theatre. In a theatre, show starts at 6 p.m. So when does the air conditioning start? If you talk about energy in a theatre, it would start at 5:45. Machine doesn't know how many people are coming in. So typically when you enter in at 6 o'clock, either the theatre will be very cool or it will be warm. And it is these kind of things which we avoid. If it is too cool means it has wasted energy. If it is too warm means the customer is uncomfortable. Things of this nature can be sorted out through cloud computing or using algorithms in the cloud, and it cannot be done through static systems which the traditional BMSs are. I'm just given an example broadly, but there are several such cases which show that the cloud algorithms work much better. We can support them in two or three ways. The first is actually automating of scope 3 emissions. Like I said, if you are wanting to sort out the carbon emission problems, especially for big companies, the company needs to understand its scope 3 emissions. And scope 3 emissions typically nowadays, to a large extent, most companies do it manually. And we are here to help them automate on that. It's a lot of technology involved because it will involve large learning models and so on and so forth. And Once the invoice comes, we'll pick up the carbon emissions of that particular product, and it will compute it totally in the system itself, in the client system, and then it gets integrated into the reporting system, financial reporting systems, etc. So this is what we are planning to do, and our platform is the one which will help companies not only in terms of improving their productivity, but it will also help shareholders and investors to understand what sort of ESGs or sustainability goals the companies are achieving. What we are looking at is, if you look at in the Indian context, since we are based here in Bengaluru, so far SEBI has mandated that only top 1,000 companies have to file in their ESG report. So far the carbon disclosures were voluntary in nature. The Ministry of Power along with the other ministries are trying to get carbon accounting regulations in place in 2026. So our main aim is to prepare companies for this particular purpose, and companies who want to start and be ready for that, we are trying to help them by automating and understanding the emissions, and also by integrating it into their financial reporting systems, as well as doing some carbon credit work so that they can benefit from the exercise of accounting carbon. It involves 2 or 3 kinds of technologies here. One is you need the IoT sensor bases to actually capture the data. Once the data is captured, the client already has the data, he doesn't have to go through this sensing. He can directly get into our algorithms in the cloud and get his reports, and he can use the agentic AIs in the cloud and get whatever results he wants. The whole purpose is to make it easy for clients or for customers to come in and automate and get results. So this is what we aim to do, and 2026 is not far off. Hopefully by next year we'll see a lot of regulations in place, and we are here to help companies achieve those goals. Hi, my name is Arun Raju. I'm the founder of Hertzwave Innovations Private Limited, a Bangalore-based technology startup in the sustainability space. We are here to empower businesses to reach net zero. That is the basic aim of the business, and in this business I am helped by 3 other people who are the co-founders, and one of them with my wife, and the other 2 are my classmates from engineering. In fact, dorm mates for 3 years in the engineering college, and my own experience has been that I've worked with several firms in India and Middle East, and several well-known companies, and I started this journey of entrepreneurship with investing into a company called Enerbrain in 2017. Enerbrain was a company which was basically into HVAC energy optimization, which is basically scope 1, scope 2 emissions optimization. And I saw the good results there. There was some lacuna which we are trying to overcome it through Hertzwave. With me, that is where we are trying to automate scope 3 emissions and carbon accounting. In this, the 2 classmates which I mentioned, one of them is Kamesh, and the other is Sarath. Kamesh is the CTO and Sarath is the Chief Operations Officer. Kamesh has several years of experience in the tech area. He has worked with ISRO as a scientist. Apart from that, he has worked in Motorola and HP as a director. And he was also into a startup in the facility management space. Sarath also comes from a background of Indian telephone industries, HP, and from Jio. After leaving college, met only after a period of 35 years, that too at alumni meet in Bangalore. And it was strange that all 3 of us were working in similar areas. We discussed it over a couple of alumni meets and then decided that we'll come together to set up Hertzwave. Our experiences and our backgrounds are quite similar, and all of us have noticed that there is a problem which can be sorted out, which is scope 3 automation and carbon accounting. That is the reason we are here.
At Hertzwave, we are actually striving to remove the FUD around carbon accounting. So if you were to visualize the application, you can look at it as 3 distinct parts. The first part is the measurement. There is an adage which says, if you can't measure, you cannot understand. And if you can't understand, you cannot control. So that's exactly what we are trying to do. So the first part is measurement, and here it primarily involves IoT based analytics for the class 1 and 2 emissions, and for scope 3 we are trying to do automation a different way. The second part is basically about analytics. Once you have the data, the ability to do analytics on the data and produce meaningful insights which will be useful for reporting, for compliance, for understanding how much of carbon we are actually expending, and then enabling organizations to set goals to move towards net zero. And the third part essentially is the reporting and compliance and reporting aspects of ESG which come into play. It's an misunderstood area where you rely on typical enterprise systems to do the reporting without actually integrating the data measurement and the analytics of it into the whole chain. These two parts become distinct and separate. One has to go through a lot of manual processes to basically take all the analytics data, feed it into the reporting systems, and then generate reports. What we are striving to do is also to ensure that the application integrates well with the reporting ecosystems, whether it's the financial reporting systems of enterprises, whether it is various other reporting mechanisms which they would have, and in the process provide a seamless end-to-end experience for our customers. And the other aspect is that this application basically striving to see whether we can make it self-administrable without too much of involvement from typically what tends to happen is you need a lot of consultants who will guide you through the process, and then it becomes a very expensive affair. So what we are trying to do is to simplify the whole process of carbon reporting to the extent that anybody who is trying to use the application would be able to learn on the fly, administer on the fly, and then be able to get reports out of it seamlessly. That's the application which we are trying to build. When you visualize this application as three different parts: the measurement, then the analytics, and the reporting. Now, Hertzwave's primary focus is in the analytics and the reporting space. So in the analytics space, we are trying to build agentic AI models for different industries. As our co-founder explained, we are focusing on a couple of industries to start with. One being commercial real estate, which is basically all kinds of buildings, could be tech parks, could be hotels, could be any kind of commercial real estate. Next, we would probably be focusing on manufacturing as well. So with this, what we are essentially trying to do is to build data sets which are very specific for those industries, which will enable you to do analytics which can then give you insights and predictions for that particular industry in question. And once you are able to generate enough data, it is not going to be just useful for the first user of this particular application from that industry, but for that industry in general, where different other players in that industry can actually make use of this data for predictions from day one. Typically, it takes a lot of time for us to basically generate data, do analytics on this data, train the models, and then arrive at predictions which are highly accurate. Now, once you have enough data, what then tends to happen is that for any other player in that industry starting off from day one, he would have access to that kind of predictions because the data for that particular industry vertical is already captured in that agentic AI model. Now the next part, the third part which we are also focusing on is the reporting aspect. Now reporting generally involves a lot of disclosures. So different industries have different standards which they need to adhere to. In India, we adhere to what has been defined by SEBI, and it's called BRSR. And BRSR has a number of disclosures. Similarly, if one were to look at real estate, commercial real estate, there is a standard called GRESB, and universally there is something called GRI, which is another standard from which the different other standards are derived. As part of reporting, we are also trying to see how we can simplify the whole aspect of reporting, right from data capture, data analytics, and then the data being available for different activities like planning for net zero, and then measuring the progress towards net zero, and then eventually reporting towards the compliance against the standards in question. So that's essentially what we are trying to do at Hertzwave through this entire journey. I have been involved with a couple of startups before this and have had a long corporate career. But when a couple of your classmates, we all tend to meet up over a drink and then think of something, let's try to do something exciting. Why not try to do something to save this world, right? And the buzz around the world is all about everything green, and ESG is the buzzword these days. So we did a lot of thinking. It didn't happen overnight. So we spent almost a year discussing this over various meetings, looking at what are the various possibilities. Over this journey, we started gathering momentum and gathering excitement because finally we could see the vision in front of us becoming clearer, what we wanted to do, where is the opportunity space, and then the opportunity suddenly starts looming big in front of you. Your plans start falling in place. And that's exactly the point we are at, where we know what we want to do, and we know what our end goals are. We have now defined what timelines we want to address this whole program, and we are now ready to get off the blocks.